Hey everybody, what's happening? Son of a Silver Stacker here. In today's numismatic news and information for the 21st day of October 2021, I'd like to welcome you to JM Bullion so we can look at the live spot prices. However, before I do that, I'm going to welcome you to CGS Coin Tribe. We've got something fantastic going on there this evening at 6 p.m. Eastern, so please join us. And that would be 3 p.m. Pacific. If you can make it, please do. We have an outstanding event. It's called an auction to benefit charity. It's Coin for a Cause. And we're going to be benefiting the Toys for Tots charity as well as homeless shelters. We're going to be stoking them out with some blankets and cold weather gear, gloves, caps, and that sort of thing. Now, off to JM Bullion. Now, obviously, you can see this is not their homepage. And what I'm doing here at this page is looking at the stock status of silver. Now, we know that we've heard that there's a silver planchet shortage in the United Kingdom. Okay, so from now on, I'm going to be starting at the stock status page. So there's out of stock 39.17, in stock 508. And this is the launch page of in stock. Look at, they got a 100-ounce bar sitting there right at the top. So that's really interesting. Now, off to the Google machine and look at the news. You know, they used to say when the United States sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And that's in regards to the economy. Now, China's economy is so massive and so large that I believe those roles have reversed somewhat. When China sneezes, I imagine the rest of the world was going to catch a cold, and maybe that's what's happening because there's something called Evergrande. And if you haven't heard about that, well, you might want to look into that. It could have repercussions worldwide, and they wouldn't be positive. It wouldn't be a positive ripple. Maybe it could, but we don't know. We haven't, it hasn't happened. The event hasn't happened yet, but when it does, I'm sure that there will be people to gobble up what's left over. Just it's really wild what's happening in the economy with inflation. So because of things like this happening, Bitcoin, if you haven't heard, Bitcoin hit $66,000 just yesterday, and it says there Bitcoin jumps to new high above 66,000. That was 19 hours ago. Bulls shoot for the moon after a new record high 11 hours ago. It's incredible what's happening in the markets. And it gets even more incredible the deeper you dig. Now, check this out. This is Germany producer inflation rose 14.2% in September. And that's the most since the 1974 oil crisis. This is, like I said, this is the deeper you get, the more interesting it gets. It says German producer inflation pressure keeps rising. PPI rose 14.2% in September, year over year, rising the most since October 1974. And that's back in 1974 was 14.5%. Now, for perspective, that was when prices rose strongly during the first oil crisis. Now, that was the energy crunch in the early 70s, mid 70s. Now, the main driver was energy prices they're up 32%, driven by natural gas up 58.9. And German PPI, excluding energy, also rose by a huge 8.6%. So are the Germans purchasing things at different price levels than the American producers? I don't know. They easily could be, not sure. But I imagine if things are in line and it is a global economy with everybody paying the same amount for goods and services, we could easily see this kind of PPI. Now, this is the producer price index. This isn't end user price, right? The consumer. That's when these will be passed on, and that's usually how it works. They usually get passed on. Now, this is German producer price inflation. Pardon me. Now, look what happened out of Germany just yesterday, and I don't know if that producer price inflation was the reason for this move, but it could be. And I want to thank Maneko64 for turning me on to this. It says Bundesbank chief Weidmann quits early with one last inflation warning. And this is a 4-minute read from Reuters by Balas Coriani and Francesco Canepa. It must be him. Weidmann wants to leave on December 31st of this year. And he's got over 5 years left on an 8-year term, so he bounced early, no doubt about it. A conservative policymaker, he was often in the minority. And basically, he's got one little thing he wants to say before he left to his staff. It says, even as he announced his departure, the third successive Bundesbank president to quit early, Weidmann warned about inflation risks. It will be crucial not to look one-sidedly at deflationary risks, but not to lose sight of prospective inflationary dangers either, he said in a message to staff. Well, there it is. And he's the head guy. He's the chief, right? So he obviously sees the writing on the wall, and numbers don't lie, right? Look at this. This is going, what do they call that? Parabolic, right? So if you want to see some interesting news, parabolic, let me go here. And this is macro trends. This is silver prices, 100-year historical chart. And I wanted to show you this because we are in similar territory from what we had in 1970s. Remember they said 1974? So let's head over to the mid-70s on this particular chart. Now you can see that it was, now this is the silver price, right? So this is the opening price that year, the high, or rather, the average price. This is the opening price that year, I believe, the high that year, the low that year, and where it ended that year. Okay, so it ended the year down 15% the following year, though, because there was some kind of action in inflation and an energy crisis, and also Nixon got off the gold standard. It looks like silver for those 3 years, 72, 73, and 74, had some decent movement, but it was still, I mean, if you look at 48%, 137 to close it that year at 203 is a 50% jump just about. But really, the real action started here in 1979. Now, if you can time this kind of move in silver, I would imagine that would be a really amazing thing to do. And let me give you some data, and maybe you can do that. So I'll go here to this chart right here, and this is a beautiful thing. This is historical inflation rates, 1914 to 2021. Now, table of historical rates, 1914, 2021. It's got the year, January all the way to December, and an average. So we saw that silver made quite a move in 1972. Well, let's find out what happened in 1972. So here we go down this chart, and I'm sorry if you're getting dizzy here. So much stuff going on. Here we go. So look at that. It was flat. Inflation was flat. But the very next year, it went, bam, look at that, up to 8.7% with an average of 6.2. So looks like the end of the year, which is we're headed now, things are starting to go up, and it's noticeable. And although the average may not be the same for 2021, we definitely see these last 3 months where inflation is moving higher. And look at this, in 1974, things really get moving with inflation. But if you go back to that silver chart, the prices, they don't start happening until 1979. And what happens in 1979, my bad, look at this. It looks kind of like it's about single digit here up until December, and then January, February, and then things start to take off in March of 1979. So, and that continues all the way. So what is it? I want to say October of 1981. So that was the period. And look at this, October 1981, it was actually going down then. So that was the downward, you weren't getting $50 an ounce, right? You were getting in 1981 maximum of 1630. So if inflation is any indicator, I would say the people that were kind of maybe startled here with inflation maybe were the ones that got ahead, because if you started accumulating here, not so bad, but you'd have to sell here to make a profit. And let's face it, that inflation continued on. So this is a really hard thing to understand, folks. I don't think any of it really makes any sense at all. Sorry about that, the lisp. I felt like Cindy Brady for a second. Anyway, let me tell you, I think that's all I got for you. I'm going to do my +1. If you can figure out these rates on these charts, more power to you. And it's all there. All the data is there, and it's in black and white, and numbers don't lie. So if you can figure out that, more power to you. Now for my +1 today, it says here, each individual is unique and has been given the diversity of thought. And when we recognize that each person does think differently, it should lead us to respect the right of that person to express his or her opinion, right? And remember this is something that's really old school, probably from the days back of Greek philosophy. It says intolerance will not be tolerated, right? What's that mean even? So if we go here to the Wikipedia page, the paradox of tolerance, and it says here let me read this first one right here. And I'll stop there. In 1945, philosopher Karl Popper attributed the paradox to Plato's defense of benevolent benevolent despotism, sorry, having a tough time this morning, and defined it in the open society and its enemies. Now, it says here, less well known than other paradoxes is the paradox of tolerance. Now, it says here, unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. Because if we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and the tolerance with them. Isn't that interesting? And that's an old school philosophy, very old. And The Age of Plato, Volume 1, right? So that's a really, really strong, wise analysis of a society and tolerance and intolerance, right? Who knew? Who knew? And does this speak to us today or no? Anyway, listen, I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks for dropping by. Don't forget to hit that like button. And if you do like what you hear and see, please subscribe to the channel. It's free. Son of a Silver Stacker, out.